"Go refill the punch, sweetheart. The doctors are talking." My father said it into a live microphone in front of 400 people at the 30-year gala for the clinic our family built. He just hosted my brother as the doctor who carries our name. Then he waved me toward the back of the room like hired help. In one sentence, he erased me in front of everyone we knew. I smiled. I picked up the empty crystal bowl. I went to refill the punch. That was my place, and he'd just told 400 people so. What none of them knew, not my father, not my brother, not the guests clapping in their rented tuxedos, was that the clinic in the banner above the stage had been operating under exactly one physician's license for 9 years. And it wasn't his. It wasn't my brother's. It was mine. 6 weeks later, my father would be signing a document just to keep the lights on. But that night, holding a punch bowl, he still thought he'd put me in my place. I was halfway to the service table when the state board representative tapped the microphone and asked the room a question. The question hung in the air before most people understood it. "Before the next toast," the woman at the podium said, "I have a quick formality. Whose license does this clinic actually operate under, for the plaque?" A few people laughed. They thought it was part of the program. My father laughed too. That big warm laugh he used on patients and donors, the one that filled a room and told everyone he was in charge. I stood at the service table with the empty bowl in my hands. I did not turn around. Let me back up, because you need to understand what that clinic was to us. Brennan Family Medical. 3 buildings, a logo my father designed at a kitchen table the year I was born. To everyone in our town, that name meant something. It meant the Brennans took care of you. It meant trust. My father, Harold Brennan, founded it. He'll tell you that within the first 30 seconds of meeting him. He was a family physician, old school, good hands, better handshake. For 20 years, he was the clinic. His face was on the bus benches. My brother Grant was the heir. Everyone knew that too. Grant in the holiday cards. Grant shadowing Dad on rounds at 16. Grant introduced at every dinner as the next Dr. Brennan. And me? I was the one who refilled the punch. The representative repeated her question, gently, because no one had answered. "Whose license, sir? It's just for our records." My father leaned into the mic. "Mine, of course." He smiled. 30 years. That was the lie. That was the moment I realized the whole night had a paper trail, and he'd just put his name on the wrong end of it. Before I go any further, if your chest is already tight, if you already know exactly what kind of room this was, take 1 second to like and subscribe. It genuinely helps stories like this reach the people who need them. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I read them. I like knowing who's in the room with me tonight. I'm Mallory, 36, and what you just heard was only the first crack in something my family spent 9 years pretending wasn't true. So let me take you back to that punch bowl and what happened when I finally set it down. I didn't set it down right away. I want to be honest about that. There was a version of me, the one I'd been my whole life, who would have refilled the punch, smiled at the right people, driven home, and cried in the garage where no one could see. I'd done it before, more times than I'll admit. I was the second child, the girl. In our house, that came with a script, and I'd learned my lines early. I'll keep the past short, because the past isn't the point. What they did with it is. When I was 9, I got the chemistry set Grant didn't want. When I was 12, I read my father's old anatomy texts under the covers with a flashlight. When I was 17 and told my parents I wanted to be a doctor, my mother said, "That's a lot of school for a girl who'll want a family." My father said something worse. He said, "Grant's the doctor. You can help him." I remember the kitchen. I remember the clock above the stove. I remember deciding, very calmly, that I would become a doctor and I would never ask them for permission again. That was the year I stopped raising my voice in that house. Not because I had nothing to say, because I'd learned my word was worth nothing there, and I was tired of spending it. I left for college and I didn't look back, except for the holidays, except for the calls, except for all the ways you don't actually leave a family like mine. I worked. 2 jobs through undergrad, loans I'm still paying, medical school in another state because the scholarship was there and the distance was a bonus. Grant, meanwhile, started a chiropractic program, dropped it, started a physician's assistant program, finished that one. Good for him. I mean it. But somewhere in those years, the family story quietly rewrote itself, and Grant the PA became Grant the doctor, and nobody corrected it, least of all my father. I finished my residency. Family medicine, like my dad. I think some part of me still wanted him to look at me the way he looked at Grant. I'd built my whole life around a man who waved me toward the punch. That's the wound. I might as well say it plainly now so you can watch for it. I didn't want the clinic. I didn't want money. I wanted to be claimed. I wanted to hear him say, out loud in front of people, that I was his, that I was the doctor, and mean it. I'm telling you that now because of how the night ended. Here's how I ended up holding that license. 9 years ago, my father had a health scare. A bad one. His heart. He recovered mostly, but the man who'd been the clinic could no longer be the clinic. And here's the thing. Nobody outside medicine understands. A clinic isn't a building. A clinic is a license. Every prescription, every billing code, every chart, it all flows through a physician of record. A real MD with an active license and DEA registration. When my father stepped back, that physician of record had to be someone. Grant couldn't. A PA can't be the supervising physician. A PA is the one who gets supervised. My father's own license was about to lapse. The board had flagged his continuing education hours during his recovery. The clinic was 3 buildings and 40 employees and 1 missing signature, away from being unable to legally see a single patient. So my father called me. Not Grant, me. I remember the call because he was kind on it, which he almost never was. Mallory, honey, we need you. Just for the transition, the family needs you. The family needs you. After 17 years of refilling the punch, that's the sentence that brought me home. I should have read the contract more carefully. But I didn't. I came home. I gave up a lot to do it. I'd been building my own panel of patients 3 states away. A practice that was finally mine. A city I'd chosen. A life with no Brennan banner over it. I left all of it, broke my lease, told my own patients I was leaving. Drove back to the town with the bus benches that had my father's face on them, because he'd said, the family needs you. And some wound in me had been waiting my whole life to be needed by them. The first week back, I sat across the desk from the practice manager, a man named Dale, who'd been with my father for 2 decades and signed a stack of forms an inch thick. Supervising physician agreement, DEA transfer. Medicare and Medicaid enrollment as the rendering provider. Malpractice policy in my name. Collaborative practice agreement for Grant, listing me as his supervising physician. I remember Dale not quite meeting my eyes. You're carrying a lot here, Dr. Brennan, he said. He was the first person at that clinic to call me Dr. Brennan and mean it. I didn't understand yet how much that mattered, or how much they were counting on me not noticing the weight. I signed it all. I trusted my father. That was my mistake, and it took me 9 years to stop calling it loyalty. I became the medical director of Brennan Family Medical 9 years ago, on paper, in the only place that legally matters. Every provider in that clinic, Grant included, practiced under my supervision and my license. Every prescription Grant wrote, a physician had to be responsible for. That was me. Every insurance claim the clinic submitted listed a rendering or supervising physician. That was me. The DEA registration that let the clinic stock and dispense controlled medications was tied to a physician. Me. My father's name was on the door. My name was on the documents that let the door open at all. And here's the part I want you to sit with, because it's the part that took me years to understand. They knew. My father knew. Grant knew. Dale, the practice manager, knew. They needed my license, so they took it. And then they spent 9 years making sure nobody else knew, including, somehow, me. Because the moment you forget your own power is the moment it's easiest to take. They paid me a salary, not a partnership. Medical director in the contract, staff in the family. I asked once, early, about being made a partner. My father patted my hand. Let's not complicate the family with business, sweetheart. I let it go. I'm not proud of that. I let a lot go. In the clinic, I ran everything. I built the protocols. I trained the new hires. When a patient was complicated, the nurses brought them to me. When Grant got in over his head, which was more often than the holiday card suggested, he brought them to me too. Hey, can you take a look at this one for me? That's how he said it. Casual, like asking me to grab his coffee. I'd review the chart, fix the plan, co-sign the note. Grant got the relationship. I got the liability. Let me give you one example, because it tells you everything. About 2 years ago, Grant saw a man with chest pain and called it heartburn. Sent him home with an antacid sample and a pat on the back. The man came back the next morning worse, and Coraline, bless her, walked him straight past Grant and into my office. I looked at him for 30 seconds and sent him to the ER. He was having a heart attack. He lived because a nurse knew which Brennan was the doctor. Grant never thanked me, never mentioned it. The chart, of course, was supervised under my license, so legally that near miss was my responsibility to catch. And I'd caught it. That's the arrangement in one sentence. Grant got to play doctor, and I got to be the reason nobody died while he did. The relationship was his. The liability was mine. The name on the bus bench was his. The license on the wall was mine. The nurses saw it. That's important. So remember it. The nurses always see everything. There was one in particular, Coraline, who'd been at the front clinic since before I came back. A woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain and zero patience for nonsense. She watched the whole arrangement for 9 years and said nothing, because that's what you did at Brennan Family Medical. You said nothing, but I noticed she started leaving the harder charts on my desk specifically, with a sticky note, for the actual doctor. The first time, I thought it was a typo. It wasn't. I started keeping copies, quietly, every signature page, every board correspondence, every renewal. I told myself it was just good record keeping. It wasn't. Some part of me was building a folder for a day I hoped would never come. The day it stopped being a folder and started being a fuse was about a year ago. I'll tell it to you the way it happened. A Tuesday. The clinic's compliance audit. Routine. Every clinic gets them. I handled it because, of course, I did. The auditor was a thorough woman named Frances Pruitt from the state's medical board side, and she sat across from me in the small conference room with a stack of charts and a laptop. She went quiet over one of them, then another. "These prescriptions," she said. "They're billed under Dr. Brennan." "Yes," I said. "I'm Dr. Brennan." She looked at the signature, then at me, then at the framed photo on the wall behind my desk. My father, Grant, the founder's portrait, the whole dynasty. And something moved across her face. "There are 2 Dr. Brennans listed in your patient-facing materials," she said carefully. "Your father and your brother. But your brother is a PA, and your father's license expired 6 years ago. These charts," she tapped the stack, "are all supervised by you. Every controlled substance in the building is under your DEA number." "That's correct." "Does your father know how this looks?" I didn't answer, because the truth was, I didn't know what my father knew about how it looked. I only knew what he said in public. And what he said in public was that he and Grant were the doctors, and I helped. Frances Pruitt closed her laptop slowly. "I'm going to be straight with you, because I think you're the only person here who'll understand me. The clinic is legal. Barely. And it's legal because of you. But your advertising is a different department and a different kind of problem. You've got a PA being called a physician on a website I can pull up on my phone right now. You've got a retired doctor fronting a capital campaign. If a patient ever complains, and patients complain, somebody's license is going to be the one that answers for all of it." She looked at me. "And the only license in this building is yours." That was the moment the floor shifted under me. Frances Pruitt wasn't asking whether the clinic was legal. She was asking whether my family had been hiding behind me, and whether, when the bill finally came due, I'd be the one holding it alone. I walked her to the door. In the hallway, Coraline was waiting with a chart. She'd heard enough through the thin wall to understand. She didn't say anything. She just squeezed my arm once, hard, the way you grip someone who's about to find out something true. After the audit, I did something I'd never let myself do. I read everything. Not the medical files, the family files, the brochures, the website, the bus benches, the donor letters my father sent every spring, asking the town to support the practice my son and I have poured our lives into. The radio spot where Grant called himself Dr. Brennan, without a single qualifier. 9 years of a story told over my work, with my name sanded off it. I sat in my office after hours with the lamp on and I read it all. And somewhere around midnight, I stopped being hurt and started being precise. Coraline found me there the next morning, still in yesterday's clothes, the printouts spread across the desk like a map. She set down a coffee. Black, the way I take it. She'd never had to ask. "You finally looked," she said. I finally looked. She sat down across from me, took off her reading glasses, and told me things I'd spent 9 years not letting myself know. She'd been at the front desk when patients called, confused about whether Grant could refill their blood pressure medication. He couldn't, not without me, and half the time he did anyway, and I cleaned it up. She'd watched my father introduce me to donors as our office manager. Once, to my face. And I'd smiled and refilled the coffee because that's who I was in that building. "Why are you telling me now?" I asked. "Because for 9 years you've been the only doctor in a building with 2 men pretending to be one," Coraline said. "And I'm 63. I'd like to retire from a place that tells the truth. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to actually answer it in your head. If you found out that the people who called you the help had been quietly living off your work for years, would you stay quiet, or would you finally let the room see the truth?" Hold your answer. You'll want it later. Here's what I found in those files, the thing that turned the fuse into a countdown. The 30-year gala wasn't just a party. It was a fundraiser. My father was using the anniversary to launch a capital campaign, a 4th building. Dr. Grant Brennan's vision for the future of family medicine. There were pledge cards already printed. There was a major recognition, a state plaque, awarded to the clinic's physician of record, to be presented at the gala by a representative of the medical board. The board's representative would, by protocol, confirm whose license the clinic operated under. On the record, out loud. My father had invited the one person whose entire job was to say my name, and he'd planned to hand the plaque to Grant. I want to tell you what I did with that, because this is the part where I had to decide what kind of person I was going to be. The easy thing, the satisfying thing, would have been to walk into my father's office, drop the folder on his desk, and watch him sweat. To threaten, to negotiate from strength behind a closed door. I didn't do that, and I want to explain why, because it matters to how the night went. If I confronted him privately, he'd spin it. He'd had 9 years of practice spinning. He'd say I was confused, that medical director was just a title, that the family had always intended to make it right. He'd cry maybe. He was good at the warm version of himself when he needed something. By the next holiday, the story would be that ungrateful Mallory had thrown a tantrum, and the bus benches would still say what they said. The truth needed witnesses. It needed the one room he couldn't spin, the room where the board's own representative would, by her own protocol, ask the question whose answer was on file in my handwriting. So I did the hard thing, the patient thing. Nothing. I let the gala come. I made sure my folder was complete and backed up in 3 places. I had a lawyer. Her name was Estelle, sharp and calm and worth every hour. Review the supervising physician agreement, the ownership structure, and the advertising materials. She told me 2 things. 1. I was not legally exposed because I'd done nothing wrong. I'd been the responsible physician the whole time. 2. The clinic was wildly exposed, and the only person who could fix it was the one whose name was on the license. They need you more than you need them, Estelle said. They just spent 9 years making sure you didn't know it. The day you know it is the day the whole thing changes. I asked her the question I'd been circling for weeks. Is it cruel, letting it happen in front of everyone? I could just send the documents to the board and never set foot in that ballroom. Estelle put down her pen. Let me ask you something, she said. For 9 years, did your father ever once correct the record in private? Did he ever tell a donor, or a reporter, or a single patient that you were the doctor, when no one was making him? No. Then private isn't honesty? Private is just where he keeps the lie comfortable? She leaned back. He chose the public room. He chose it every time he put your brother's name on a banner and yours on a punch bowl. You're not dragging him into the open, Mallory. You're just declining to keep covering for him in it. Then she said the line I think about still. Don't go in there to destroy them, Mallory. Go in there to be seen. Let the destroying take care of itself. I RSVP'd yes. I bought a dark green dress. I told no one, not Coraline, not Estelle, exactly what I was going to do, because the truth was I didn't know. I only knew I wasn't going to refill the punch. The weeks before the gala, I did the quiet work. Not revenge. Bookkeeping. There's a difference, and it matters. Every night after the last patient left, I stayed. I pulled my own personnel file from the locked cabinet in Dale's office. I had a key. Of course I did. I was the medical director. And I copied the supervising physician agreement I'd signed 9 years ago without reading it closely enough. There it was, in plain language. Physician of record, sole supervising physician. Responsible licensee for all 3 locations. My signature at the bottom. Young and trusting. I copied the DEA registration certificate. 1 number, mine. Every milligram of every controlled substance in 3 buildings traced back to that 1 line. I pulled the Medicare enrollment file and found myself listed as the rendering provider on 9 years of claims. 9 years of the clinic getting paid because a real physician's name sat in the right field. My name. Then I went looking for the other side of it. The public side, the story they told. I printed the website. I printed the donor letters. I found the radio spot in the marketing folder on the shared drive, the one where an announcer's warm voice said, "When you visit Dr. Grant Brennan, you're trusting the next generation of a family that's cared for this town for 30 years. I printed the transcript. I printed the bus bench mock-ups. I printed the gala program, which listed under our physicians, my father and my brother. Not me, the one physician in the building, left off the list of physicians at the party celebrating the building she kept open. Coraline started staying late with me. She didn't have to. She brought egg salad sandwiches from home and her own pair of scissors, and she sat across the conference table and helped me sort it into 2 stacks. On the left, what the document said. On the right, what the family said. The gap between the stacks was the whole story. "You know what gets me?" she said one night, peeling the crust off a sandwich she wasn't going to eat. "It's not even that they lied to the patients. It's that they lied to you. For 9 years, they had you believing the help story so hard, you almost believed it yourself." She pointed the scissors at me, gently. "You're the one who signed the DEA card, Mallory. You've known the whole time. You just weren't allowed to know. You knew." She was right. That's the part I keep coming back to. The cruelest thing they took wasn't credit. It was my own certainty about who I was. I built 3 copies of the folder, one for Estelle, one in a fireproof box at my apartment. one I scanned, encrypted, and emailed to myself because I'd watched enough of my family to know that paper goes missing in houses like ours. I did not show it to my father. I did not threaten anyone. I did not send a single email I'd regret. I just made the gap between the two stacks impossible to argue with, and then I waited for a room with the right witnesses. Then, a week before the gala, the plan almost died. This is the part I didn't see coming. My father, who never called me except to ask for something, called me. Warm voice, the transition voice, the family needs you voice. Mallory, honey, the gala. I want you up front this year, at the family table. For one stupid second, my heart did the thing it had done my whole life. The hope, the maybe this time. I hated myself for it, even as it happened. That's kind, Dad, I said. And listen, there's a board woman coming to give us a recognition thing. Some plaque. Total formality. I'm going to have Grant accept it, you understand? For continuity, the next generation, all that. But I want you there to see it. You've been such a help to this family. A help. There it was. He wasn't seeing me. He was staging me. He wanted the daughter at the table so the photo looked whole, and he wanted to hand my plaque to my brother while I watched and smiled. And here's the reversal that almost stopped everything. For about a day, I considered not going at all. Just sending the documents to Estelle and the board, and letting it land in a deposition somewhere quiet. No scene. No room full of strangers. No risk of my voice shaking in front of 400 people. It was Coraline who set me straight. I told her I was thinking about skipping it. She looked at me over the reading glasses. He just told you he's going to give your plaque to Grant while you watch, she said. And you want to make it easy for him by not being in the room? She shook her head. Sweetheart, 9 years, be in the room. So I went, to the family table, where my father had put me, not knowing he'd seated me in the front row of his own undoing. 2 days before the gala, they almost got ahead of me. Dale, the practice manager, 20 years with my father, loyal as a dog, noticed my personnel file had been moved in the cabinet. He's careful that way. He went to my father. I know this because Coraline overheard the back half of it through the office wall, the way she'd overheard everything for 9 years. That afternoon, my father appeared in my office doorway. He hadn't been in my office in months. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, doing the warm version of himself, and he said, Mallory, sweetheart, I've been thinking. After the gala, maybe it's time we made you a partner. Properly. On the letterhead. There it was. The thing I'd asked for 9 years ago. The thing I'd wanted at the kitchen table at 17. Dangled now, 2 days before the one room where the truth would surface, by a man who'd just learned his daughter had moved her own file. A year earlier, that sentence would have undone me. I'd have cried with gratitude. I'd have shredded the folder myself to keep the peace. But I'd read everything by then. I knew exactly what partner meant in his mouth 2 days before a board representative arrived. It meant, please don't. That's kind, Dad, I said. The same words I'd used my whole life. They tasted different now. So we're good? He searched my face. For the gala? We're good, I said. I'll be there. And I would. I just wasn't going to be the daughter he was counting on. I let him walk out of my office believing he'd handled it, the way he'd handled me for 36 years. He'd offered me a partnership to buy my silence, and he'd walked away certain it had worked, because it always had. That was the last time my father underestimated me in private. The next time would have an audience. So now you know what I knew, standing at that service table with an empty punch bowl, while the board representative asked her question and my father said, Mine, of course. Let me take you back into that room. It was the grand ballroom at the country club, the one with the chandeliers and the bad acoustics that carried everything farther than people realized. 400 guests in their best. The mayor, 2 state representatives, half the doctors and nurses in the county. The clinic's banner, 30 feet wide above the stage. Brennan Family Medical. 30 years of caring for your family. The representative's name was Diane Ashford. I'd met her once, briefly, at a licensing seminar. She had a clipboard and the patient, unbothered face of a woman who has read a lot of paperwork and is not impressed by a tuxedo. The evening went exactly as my father scripted it. right up until it didn't. Cocktails, dinner, a slideshow of 30 years. And I'll tell you, I'm in maybe 2 photos in that whole slideshow. Both times in the background, both times slightly out of focus. 9 years of running that clinic, and the montage of its history had more pictures of the building's parking lot than of me. I sat at the family table and watched it scroll. My father, young, cutting a ribbon. Grant at 16 in a borrowed white coat. Donors, ribbon cuttings, the new logo. A photo of the founder's portrait being hung in the lobby. The portrait that hangs in my office now. I counted my appearances like a person pressing on a bruise to see if it still hurt. It still hurt. I let it. Then I stopped counting because I'd realized something. A slideshow is a story someone chooses to tell, and the board representative 2 tables over was about to tell a different one, off a page nobody could edit. Diane Ashford caught my eye once during dinner. I don't think she knew the family dynamics. I think she just saw a woman sitting very still at a loud table, and something in her professional instinct filed it away. She gave me a small nod, the kind you give a stranger. I gave it back. Neither of us knew yet that in 20 minutes she'd say my name into a microphone and change my whole life with a formality. Then the toasts. My father took the stage to an ovation. He was good up there. I'll give him that. 40 years of bedside manner makes a man comfortable with a room. He thanked the town. He thanked his late wife, my mother, and the ballroom went tender. He thanked his son and partner, Dr. Grant Brennan, who carries our name into the future. Grant stood. The room clapped. Then his eyes found me at the family table, and his expression did the thing it always did. That small, mean flicker. And of course my daughter Mallory's here, helping behind the scenes like always. He smiled. Mallory, sweetheart, looks like the punch bowl's empty. Go give us a refill. The doctors are talking. The laughter. Real laughter. The warm kind, from people who thought they were in on a charming little family moment and didn't know they were watching 9 years of theft performed as comedy. I stood up, I picked up the empty bowl. And I started toward the back of the room, because that is who I had always been in that building, and old habits walk you to the service table before your mind catches up. That's when Diane Ashford stepped to the podium. Before the next toast, she said, I have a quick formality. And she asked her question, and my father laughed and said, Mine, of course. 30 years. I stood at the service table with the empty bowl in my hands, and I did not turn around. Not yet. Sir, Diane Ashford said, patient as ever, I want to make sure we engrave the plaque correctly. The clinic's physician of record, the supervising license for all 3 locations, that's on file with us. It's not under your name. A pause. And it's not under your son's. Your son is a physician's assistant. He can't be a physician of record. The laughter in the room changed. You could hear it change. It got thinner. My father's smile held, but his voice tightened. There must be a clerical... It's not clerical. Diane turned a page. I have it right here. I just need the physician of record to come up and accept the recognition. They've held this clinic's license alone for 9 years. She looked up at the room. Is Dr. Mallory Brennan here tonight? The room turned. 400 faces looking for a doctor named Brennan they didn't know existed. I set the punch bowl down. I want to tell you, I felt triumphant. I didn't. My hands were shaking around that empty crystal. 9 years, 17 before that, a lifetime of being the one in the corner. And now, a stranger with a clipboard had said my name into a microphone and made the whole room go looking for me. That's me, I said. Not loud. I didn't need to be loud. The room was already silent. I walked toward the stage. My heels on the hardwood were the only sound in 400 people. It was the longest walk of my life and the shortest. I'd made versions of that walk 1,000 times. To the service table, to the back, to the punch, head down, invisible, the help. This time, I kept my head up. This time, the whole room was watching the doctor they'd been told didn't exist. And for the length of that walk, I let myself feel every one of the 9 years I'd spent crossing rooms the other direction. My father's face. I'll remember it the rest of my life. He watched me cross that room like he was watching the floor open under his own feet. Grant had gone very pale beside him. My mother wasn't there to see it. She'd been gone 15 years. And I caught myself thinking, absurdly, in the middle of that silent walk, that she was the one who'd said I'd want a family instead of a degree, and I'd gotten the degree, and the family had spent it. Here's where it became the 8 steps. I didn't plan them. They happened on their own, the way the truth does when you finally stop holding the door shut. First, the lie, already spoken into the microphone. Mine. My father had told 400 people the license was his. Then, the first evidence. Diane Ashford handed me the plaque and said plainly into the mic for the room. Dr. Mallory Brennan, physician of record for all 3 Brennan family medical locations since the license transferred 9 years ago. The clinic operates under her license and her DEA registration. Then, the denial. My father grabbed the spare microphone from the table beside the stage. She's the medical director, it's a title. The practice has always been mine. And Grant's. Then, the stronger evidence, because my father couldn't help himself. He kept going. Mallory helps with the paperwork. That's all she's ever done. The paperwork. And Diane Ashford, who deals in paperwork for a living, did not raise her voice. She just said, into her own microphone, in the flat tone of a woman reading a fact, "Sir, the paperwork is the practice. Every prescription written in this clinic for 9 years, including every prescription your son wrote, was legally written under her supervision and her license. Every controlled medication in your buildings is registered to her. Without her signature, this clinic cannot legally see a single patient. Not one." The room was no longer thin. It was airless. Then, the final reveal. I stepped to the podium mic, and for the first time in my whole life, I said the true thing out loud, in front of all of them, calm as a Tuesday. "I'm the doctor," I said. "I've been the doctor for 9 years. Dad, you toasted Grant as the one who carries our name. Grant is a PA. I'm the MD this entire clinic runs on. You knew that when you called me to come home. You called me because you needed a license, and I was it." I paused. "I refilled the punch for 9 years, so you wouldn't have to look at that." Then, the silence. 400 people. Nobody breathed. Somewhere near the back, a glass touched a table, and the sound traveled the whole room. Then, he lost control. My father stood so fast, his chair went over backward. The microphone shrieked feedback. "After everything this family gave you," he said. And there it was. The arrogance hanging itself in public, because the next words out of his mouth were, "You do not get to embarrass me at my own clinic." His clinic. In front of the board's own representative, in front of the donors holding pledge cards for a building to be named after a man who could not legally treat a patient. Grant tried to save it. That was almost the worst part. He stepped to the mic, doing the calm voice thing. "Okay, let's everybody just..." And a woman at one of the medical tables, a physician I recognized, called out, not unkindly, just clearly, "Grant, are you a doctor or not?" He opened his mouth. He closed it. He didn't answer. In a room of 400 people, my brother could not say the word. That answered it for everyone. What happened next happened fast, and I watched it like I was outside my own body. A man at the head table, Edward Castellano, the biggest pledge on the campaign, a developer who'd promised the lead gift for the new building, stood up. He was holding his pledge card. He looked at the banner 30 feet wide above the stage. He looked at my father, frozen behind a fallen chair. He looked at me, holding a plaque with my name on it. "Let me make sure I understand," Edward said, and he had the kind of voice that didn't need a microphone. "I pledged $250,000 to a building named for Dr. Grant Brennan. And Dr. Grant Brennan isn't a doctor. Nobody answered him. Nobody could. He set his pledge card face down on the tablecloth. The small, soft sound of it carried in that silence like a gavel. And then it happened all over the room. That quiet rustle, 400 people doing the math at once, hands setting cards face down on white linen. A sound like the whole campaign, exhaling and not breathing back in. A physician at one of the medical tables, an internist I'd referred patients to for years, started clapping, slow at first. Then the table next to her. Then the nurses' tables. And the nurses knew, the nurses had always known, and they clapped the hardest. It moved across the ballroom in a wave until it wasn't polite applause anymore. It was the sound of a room correcting a record that had been wrong for 30 years. I stood at the podium and let it wash over me. I didn't smile, I didn't raise my hands. I just stood there and let 400 people see the doctor they'd been told didn't exist. My father didn't clap. He bent down, slowly, and set his fallen chair upright, and sat in it and looked at the table. Grant had his hand over his eyes. The mayor, 2 tables back, leaned to whisper to his wife and didn't look away from me while he did it. And the last thing, the thing that closed the 8 steps, came from Diane Ashford, the woman with the clipboard who'd never once raised her voice. She gathered her papers, and before she stepped down, she said evenly to my father into the open mic, "Dr. Brennan, the elder, you should know that representing a non-physician as a physician in your advertising is a matter for the board. I'd encourage you to speak with the board before the board speaks with you." She paused. "And you'll want your daughter in the room when you do. She's the only license you've got." Then she handed me the plaque, and the consequences I'd waited 9 years for stopped being something I imagined and became something with a date on it. If you've ever been the one who held something up while someone else took the bow, if you've ever had to wait years for a room to finally see the truth, I'd love to hear what that moment was for you. Tell me below. Then the consequences began. The pledge cards didn't get collected. People put them down. You could see them all over the ballroom, setting the little cards face down on the white tablecloths. Quietly, the way you put down something that has turned out not to be true. A capital campaign dies the moment its story dies, and the story had just died in front of every donor in the county. Diane Ashford finished her formality because she was a professional, and the plaque still had to be presented. She shook my hand at the podium. "Congratulations, Dr. Brennan," she said, and then, lower, just for me, "You might want to look at how your name's been used in those donor materials. There are people on my board who would find that very interesting." I knew exactly what she meant. So did my father, gray-faced at his fallen chair. So did Grant, who had sat back down and was staring at the tablecloth like it might tell him what to do. I didn't release anything that night. I want to be clear about that. I didn't have to. The truth was already loose in the room, and the truth does its own work. I walked off the stage with a plaque that had my name on it, past the family table where my father stood frozen, past 400 people who would spend the next week telling everyone they knew, and out the same doors I'd been waved toward 100 times to refill the punch. In the parking lot, Coraline was leaning against my car. She'd come. Of course she'd come. She handed me my coat. "Well," she said, "you were in the room." I started laughing. Then I wasn't laughing. She put her arms around me, and I stood in a country club parking lot in a green dress and cried for the first time in 9 years. Not because it hurt, but because for 1 minute, in front of everyone, I had been the doctor, and someone had finally said my name out loud and meant it. She held on until I was done. She didn't say anything. She knew there was nothing to say. The fallout didn't wait for Monday. It started in the parking lot, in the texts, before I'd even finished crying on Coraline's shoulder. By Monday morning, the clinic's 2 biggest referring physicians had quietly asked to clarify the leadership structure before they sent another patient our way. Referrals are the bloodstream of a practice. When they hesitate, The practice starts to die from the inside, slowly, in a way that doesn't show up for weeks, and then shows up all at once. By Tuesday, the capital campaign was over. Not paused, over. Edward Castellano's lawyer sent a one-line letter withdrawing the lead pledge in light of material misrepresentations. 3 more major donors followed within 48 hours. You cannot raise money for a building named after a doctor who isn't one, not in a town where 400 people watched him fail to say the word. By Wednesday, the local paper ran a small piece. Not a scandal, just a correction, which is sometimes worse, noting that Brennan Family Medical's longtime medical director and physician of record was the founder's daughter, Dr. Mallory Brennan, and that the practice's advertising was under review by the state medical board. The reporter called me for a comment. I gave her 3 sentences, all true, none cruel. I've been the physician of record for 9 years. The clinic is in full compliance because of that. We're correcting our public materials to reflect it. That was all. Estelle told me later that the restraint did more damage than any quote I could have given. Then the patients started. Not all of them. Most never knew the difference. But the ones who'd seen Dr. Grant for their blood pressure, their kids' ear infections, their refills. Some of them did the math and weren't happy about it. The clinic's phones lit up. Dale, the loyal practice manager who'd spent 20 years protecting my father, came to my office on Thursday, looking like a man who'd aged a decade in a week. "I didn't know it was this far out of bounds," he said. He couldn't look at me. "The advertising. I figured it was just marketing." "You knew I was the only license, Dale," I said. Not angry, just true. "You handed me the forms." He nodded. He had nothing. Then he said the thing that told me everything had already shifted. "What do you want me to do?" For 9 years, Dale's question had always been, "What does Harold want?" Now it was, "What do I want?" The whole building had turned on its axis, and it had turned toward the only doctor in it. The techs started too. Not from my father. He was too proud and too busy watching his campaign collapse. From the edges of the family, an aunt I hadn't heard from in years. "Heard there was a scene at the gala. Your father's devastated. Was that really necessary?" A cousin. "Whatever happened between you and Uncle Harold, blood is blood." The narrative was already being assembled, the way it always was in my family. Poor Harold, ungrateful Mallory, a scene at a party. I'd seen this movie. I knew my part by heart. I didn't answer any of them. There was nothing to defend. The documents said what they said. The board representative had read them aloud to 400 witnesses. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to argue with my family about who I was, because the truth had been entered into the record by someone who didn't even know us. Let them build their narrative. The license had my name on it, and the whole county had heard a stranger read it. And then, the part I told you about at the very beginning happened. 6 weeks after the gala, my father called me. Not to apologize. He's not built that way. He called because the board, prompted by Diane's interest and by a complaint from a patient who'd realized Dr. Grant wasn't a doctor at all, had opened a formal inquiry into the clinic's advertising and structure. And the only way to keep all 3 buildings open, to keep 40 people employed, to keep the controlled substance registration active, to keep the lights on, was for the actual physician of record to formally take ownership and responsibility for the practice in writing, on the record, under her real title. That was me. He needed me to sign. He came to my office to ask. My office now, with my name on the door, I'd had it changed. He sat in the chair across from my desk like a patient waiting for bad news. Grant stood by the window, not looking at me. I'd had Estelle draft the document. It made me the sole physician owner of the practice that had always run on my license, with my father and Grant offered employment if they wanted to stay. Fair terms, legal terms, more generous than they had any right to expect. My father tried, even then. Old habits. Mallory, he said in the warm voice, the transition voice. Let's not do this with lawyers. We're family. We can sort the business out at the kitchen table, like we always have. I almost laughed. The kitchen table, where my mother said I'd want a family instead of a degree. Where he told me Grant was the doctor and I could help. The kitchen table was where this whole thing had been decided once already, when I was 17 and outnumbered. We're not at the kitchen table, Dad, I said. We're at my desk. He flinched, just slightly. He understood. I slid the document across. Read it out loud, I said. Read whose name is on the license. He read it. His voice didn't fill the room the way it used to. He'd built that voice for 40 years, the one that comforted patients and charmed donors and waved his daughter toward the punch. And in my office, it came out small. Halfway through, it cracked. Once, on my name, Dr. Mallory Brennan. He'd written that name on a kitchen table 36 years ago, and then spent 9 years pretending it belonged to someone else. He signed. There wasn't another option, and we both knew it. His hand shook on the second page. He set the pen down very carefully when he was done, the way you set down something you're afraid will break, and for a moment he just looked at his own signature under mine, the founder's name now sitting below the daughter's, the right way up for the first time in 9 years. Grant signed too, as an employee. He stopped at the door on his way out. For a second, I thought he might finally say it. Sorry, or you carried me, or any of the things that would have cost him something. Instead, he said, You could have told us you wanted it the whole time. You could have just said, and there it was, the last small theft. Even now, he was trying to make my silence the crime instead of their lie. I did say, Grant, I told him. I said it when I was 17. You all decided I was helping. I looked at him until he looked away. You never had to ask me to hold it up. You just handed me the weight and called it my job. He didn't have an answer for that. He left. He stayed 3 months, then took a PA position at a clinic 2 towns over, where he is, by all accounts, a perfectly good physician's assistant. We don't talk much. That's all right. Some things don't need to be fixed. They just need to be true. Estelle handled the board, because I was, and had always been, the responsible physician, and because the moment the misrepresentation surfaced, I corrected every piece of advertising in a single week. New website, new signage, the bus benches scheduled to come down. The board closed its inquiry with a warning and a fine paid by the practice. No license suspended. Nobody's. Mine was never at risk. I'd done my job for 9 years. Theirs were never at risk. They didn't have any. That was the whole bitter joke of it. The joke I'd been living inside the entire time. There was only ever one license in that family, and it had spent 36 years refilling the punch. The practice didn't die. I want you to know that, because for a few weeks I thought it might. Referrals came back once the structure was clean, and the truth was on the website where the lie used to be. Turns out doctors trust a practice run by an actual physician more than one run by a banner. I brought on 2 real physicians as associates, people who wanted to practice good medicine and didn't need their names on a bus bench. I made Dale's job easier and his title smaller, and to his credit, he stayed and did it well. I gave every nurse who'd quietly carried the truth a raise, starting with the ones who'd left the hard charts on my desk with a sticky note that said, "For the actual doctor." I framed one of those sticky notes. It's in my office, too, next to the plaque. My father stayed. That surprised me. He's 71 now. He comes in 2 days a week and sees a few of his oldest patients, the ones who've been with him since the bus benches, and he refers everything else to me. The daughter, the doctor. There was a Thursday, a couple of months after the signing, when an old patient of his came in confused and frightened, sundowning, not sure where she was. My father sat with her for an hour, held her hand, talked her down. He was good at it. He always was. That was the maddening thing. He was a genuinely good doctor and a genuinely careless father, and I'd spent my whole life unable to hold both of those at once. When she was calm, he walked her to my office. "This is Dr. Brennan," he told her. "She'll take it from here. She's the best we've got." He didn't look at me when he said it, but he said it, and I took it from there. We don't talk about the gala. We don't talk about much. But last month, a patient in the waiting room called me the real Dr. Brennan, right there in front of him, and he didn't correct her. He just nodded, slow, and looked at the floor. It's not the apology I wanted when I was 17 at that kitchen table. It might be the closest thing I'll ever get. I've made my peace with that. Some men can change a sign on a door, but never the thing inside them. And you can either spend your life waiting for the inside to change, or you can take the door. I took the door. People ask me sometimes, the ones who've heard the story, whether I forgave him. It's the wrong question, and I've stopped trying to answer it. I didn't need to forgive him to run the clinic. I didn't need him to grovel, and I didn't want him gone. What I needed was for the truth to be louder than the family story, just once, in a room where it couldn't be taken back. After 36 years, I needed someone to say my name and mean the whole weight of it. A stranger with a clipboard did that. Not my father, not my brother. A woman who'd never met me, reading a fact off a page. And maybe that's the lesson I'd give the 17-year-old in the kitchen. The people who owe you the truth are often the last ones who'll ever say it. So you build a life where the truth is written down anyway, in your handwriting, on file, and you wait for the room that has to read it. Coraline retired in the spring from a clinic that finally told the truth, exactly like she said she would. We have lunch the first Friday of every month. She still calls me the actual doctor. She still means it as a joke. I still hear it as the kindest thing anyone in that building ever said to me. Here's the thing, I'd tell the girl with the flashlight and the anatomy book under the covers, the one who decided in a kitchen that she'd never ask permission again. They will let you hold the whole thing up. They will call it your job and never your name. They will wave you toward the punch in front of everyone and call it love. And one day, a stranger with a clipboard will ask the room a simple question, and the answer will already be on file, in your own handwriting, waiting for you to finally walk to the front and claim it. I kept the plaque. It's on the wall in my office now, where the founder's portrait used to hang. It has exactly one name on it. Mine. I refilled the punch for the last time that night. I haven't poured anyone else's drink since.